Good afternoon. It's 4:30 in Nashville, Tennessee, and that can mean only one thing. It's time for the Dental Profits webinar series, where today we're going to talk about what is the answer to this question. How much do you charge for a crown? We're going to talk about it. Stay with us. And welcome back to the show that is all about you having happier clients, better results, making more money, and enjoying the ride. So, how many times have you picked up the phone and you've gotten this kind of a question? How much do you charge for a crown? Now, that's kind of a, you can obviously, as you're hearing that, you're thinking, yeah, we get that kind of question. Dana and Brandy are saying absolutely. And there's Amy. I appreciate you guys joining us. Of course you get that question, but you also get the question in terms of different questions. I mean, the same question in different arenas, right? What do you charge for cleaning? Do y'all do root canals? How much do you charge for a root canal? How much do you charge for a crown? How quickly can I get in for a cleaning? What do you charge for cleaning? Those kinds of things, right? And there's Sandra. Hey, Sandra. So you guys get these questions all of the time, right? What is the answer? How in the world do you answer that question? Now, before I tell you what the answer is, okay, I want to reshape this for just a second. I think before we talk about how you answer the question, first and foremost, you got to change the way you're looking at a call like that. When you pick up the phone and you answer Dr. So-and-so's office or whatever service business that you're in, when you answer the phone like that, you have to see that call as more than a tactical question answer kind of a thing. What I would challenge you to look at that as is an intake, what we call an intake call. That is your first opportunity to what we call qualify your client. If you're looking at it in those terms, which we'll talk about in just a second, then you have a whole different set of outcomes than simply answering the question. So the first thing I'd tell you is, before we get to how to answer the question, change the way that you're looking at that. Treat it like a qualifying the client call rather than simply a tactical question and answer kind of thing. Then, if you can view it that way, you have a whole different set of outcomes. And I would submit that number one, rather than simply answering that question because of the way I'm viewing this call, number one, my outcome in properly qualifying the client is I want to be able to take control of this conversation. If the patient is asking questions, then I'm not in control. And I'm the healthcare professional. Even if you don't view yourself as the healthcare professional, if you're answering the phone at your practice, if you're answering the phone at your service business, whatever that is, you are that professional. As such, you're not going to be able to help the client on the other end of that phone or potential client on the other end of that phone unless or until you're asking the questions. Now, to be able to get in that place, I got to get clear in my head. This is not simply tactically question and answer, right? This is an opportunity to qualify the client. So because of that, then I have a different set of outcomes. My goal is to get control by asking the questions, so I can't let the client ask all of the questions. I realize that flies in the face of what a lot of people are used to. Kelsey may be in that same place. I don't know. Kelsey's probably experienced this. Melanie is joining us. Hey, you guys. I'm glad y'all joined in. Brandy kept... Brandy's already answering it. Brandy, you're jumping out ahead of me. Brandy's saying you answer the question with a question. And that's exactly what you do, because you understand this is bigger than a question and answer conversation. This is an opportunity for me to qualify this client. So because of that, y'all are jumping ahead of me. Cameron say, what kind of question do you ask? How do I do all this, Mr. Producer? How do I manage all of this and give this great content at the same time? It's too much. I just can't handle it. So because I realize, let me get back to Brandy's point, because I realize that my goal here is to properly qualify the patient, then I know that I've got to gain control, and the only way I can gain control is to ask questions. And again, that flies in the face, I know, because you really want to help the patient. And so when the patient calls, if you're in a dentistry, let's say, the patient calls, you feel like the best way to help them is to answer their question. You got to get clear in your mind that your outcome is different from that. You got to get clear in your mind that for you to really help the patient at the highest level, you've got to be the one in control. Now, when we come back, we're going to talk about this in depth, and I'm going to tell you how I think you should answer that, as Brandy says, with a question. And we'll talk about that in just a second. Yes, a 98% acceptance rate or better is possible. Yes, you can do it. And yes, it's not as difficult as you think, and I can show you how. I've created a course specifically to cover these topics. It's called the Dental Profits Academy. New patients, existing patients, dormant patients, exactly what to do, what you're trying to accomplish, and how to do it, and what role everybody on your team plays. Intake calls, chairside, financial arrangements, reinstatement calls. It's all there, step by step. It's online, and you can learn it at your leisure. Go to thecrabtreegroup.com and click course for more information. I'm pretty sure that I recognized a face or two in that little break that we just had. So Brandy is a movie star. Brandy, you are all over social media, and I thank you so much for being involved in that course. I'm very proud of that. I'm very proud to have you involved in that. So we're talking about, how do you answer the question, what do you charge for a crown? And we've talked about, I have to rework my mind a little bit, and I've got to get clear that when I answer that phone, that is an opportunity for me to qualify that client. Now, what does that mean, and what am I trying to accomplish? Here's what you're trying to accomplish. When I use the word qualify the client, you got to get clear that what you're really attempting to do when you answer the phone is you're trying to make sure, obviously, you want to schedule that person, right? Obviously, that's where you're trying to go. But here's the caveat. You want to make sure that when you get this person scheduled, you want to make sure that nobody has any surprises. And that's really what I mean when I say qualifying the client. What I mean is this. When that patient picks up the phone to call you and they ask, what do you charge for a crown? Or any service business, what do you charge for this? What do you guys do for that, right? That patient is narrowly focused on this one thing that they recognize they need. Now, we've all run into this situation 1,000 times. When the patient calls and says, what do you charge for a cleaning? What do you charge for a crown? If you give them a price, you schedule the patient, they show up, they're thinking this one thing. How many times do you as the doctor look in the mouth and you're going, one thing? Dude, we got a truckload of things that we need to be talking about with this patient. But the patient's not hearing it because they came in under the wrong realization. They weren't properly qualified. They asked a question. We gave them an answer. We did give them the schedule. When they showed up, they were focused on the one thing, and they're not ready to hear the treatment plan that you need to give them because of all the things that they need. The only way you can overcome that is to have the patient properly qualified. And what that means is, as Brandy says, you want to be asking questions. There's my friend Justin Jordan. Hello, Justin and Amy Massey. Hope you guys are doing well. Thanks for joining us. So on that call, because my goal is to properly qualify them, as Brandy said, I got to start asking questions. 3 things I would tell you to write down to help you with this. Before I tell you how to do it, the most important part is to get clear in your mind, because you got to rework your brain on this. For you to help the patient at the highest level, you got to get clear on reworking your brain before you can break the habits of doing what I'm going to tell you to do. So these are 3 things I would have you write down. Number 1, the person who asks the questions is the person who controls the conversation. Now, we're only talking about an intake call, but that is true in financial presentations, treatment presentations, even the presentation of scheduling. All of that. Remember, the person who asks the questions controls the conversation. Second thing I would have you write down is this. You, as the professional, must be in control of the conversation, because the patient is not the professional. The client, the customer, is not the professional. Whatever it is that you do, You're the professional, and you must be in control of the conversation. That means you must, number one, ask the questions. You got to get clear on that in your head. You're not going to be able to help your client at the highest level if you're not in control. And the person who's in control is the person who asks the questions. The number 3 thing that I would tell you to think about, if you can get those 2 things clear in your head, is this. Your goal in qualifying that person on the other end of the line is to eliminate surprises for you, eliminate surprises for them. So when they call and they ask you about this one thing, you begin asking questions to find out what are all the other things that are going on, of course, so that you don't get any surprises when you schedule the patient, but more importantly, because you're asking the patients these questions and you're now in control when they're answering, now they're having to think about everything else that's going on. So 2 minutes into this call, they're already, and there is Deborah Bailey. 2 minutes into this call, my favorite other mother on earth. 2 minutes into this call, they're not even thinking about the question that they had a moment ago, and they're now coming to the realization that they probably, although they called about this one thing, they probably should have called about this thing, this thing, this thing, and this thing. Now when you get them scheduled, you at least have them qualified to the point that they're not coming in on this one microscopic issue that they're concerned about. They now have a realization that they have a bunch of other stuff going on, if that's indeed the case, and you won't know until you ask the questions. Does that make sense? Deborah Bailey says, I am here. So if you wrote those 3 things down, you're well on your way now to thinking differently about how you answer that call. And because you're thinking differently about how you answer the call, you've got to be in control. You know you have to be in control. And the person who's in control is the person who asks the questions. And your ultimate goal, number 3, is to eliminate all the surprises. So, as Brandy said, when a patient asks, what do you charge for a fill in the blank? You answer that question with a question. You answer it with a question. Now that can look as simple as you develop sort of a style of doing this, and your first question out of the chute, as Brandy or somebody said earlier, is maybe your first question is, who am I talking to? And you get that person's name, and now you can call them by their first name, Deborah, throughout the whole conversation as you begin to ask these questions. So Deborah, let me ask you this, right? Maybe that's not it. Maybe that's not your style. Maybe you like to fly loose and free. Well, that's great. You're still coming out of the chute with a question. So when a patient says, how much do you guys charge for a crown? Your question might be, what makes you think you need a crown? What kind of crown do you need, right? And that's where you start. And then from there, you begin to ask all the questions so that you and the patient are on the same page in terms of what all the opportunities are, so that when you do schedule the patient, they're under the right realization and you have a much better idea of what it is that you might be expecting. Now, that's another aspect that we didn't talk about a moment ago. If the patient calls and says, what do you charge for a crown? You give them a price, they agree with that, and then you put them in the schedule. You're thinking in your mind, we're going to schedule this for a crown. Or what, you're thinking they only need a crown. But when they show up, you find out they got $15,000 worth of work. You weren't prepared for that. You weren't prepared to present that, right? The patient wasn't prepared to receive that, so they're certainly not going to be making a decision about that right off the bat. So that's what you're trying to eliminate. Surprises for us, surprises for them. And you're trying to ultimately bring the patient to a place where they're under the right realization. And that, at the end of the day, is the way you handle that question. Now, it doesn't matter, as I said a moment ago, whether it's what do you charge for a cleaning? How quickly could you fit me in for a cleaning? Even if it's something as mundane as that. Hey, yeah, I actually had this on a recording not long ago. The patient called, and she was like sort of talkative on the front end. And she said specifically this. My husband and I are new to the area, and we're looking for a place to call home. We're looking for a new dentist and a place that we can really fit in with. And then she followed that up with, how quickly could you get me in for a cleaning, right? Now, if I just answer with, we could see you next Tuesday at 10 a.m. and they go, great. And then we schedule it and then we show up, patient's not under the right realization. So don't let it slip by you, right? Whatever that question is right out of the chute, you want to answer with a question. So how quickly could you get me in for a cleaning? Well, let me ask you a question. When's the last time you've had a cleaning? Right? And there's where you start. And now you're asking all of these questions, and there's Karen Baker joining in. Thank you for joining me, Karen. You guys comment. Don't just sit there and listen to me. Throw some stuff in there. Ask some questions. Tell me you agree with me or you don't agree with me. But that's what we're trying to make sure that is eliminated, right? We want to make sure that the patient is coming under the right realization. We want to make sure that we're not getting any surprises. And so the 3 things I had you write down are the most important. Before you get into what are the questions that I ask, the 3 things that I had you write down are the most important. Number 1, the person who asks the question controls the call. Number 2, you are the professional. You've got to control the call, or you can't help the client at the highest level. And number 3, your ultimate outcome with this particular call is not simply to schedule the patient. It's to eliminate all of the surprises so the patient is under the right mindset, we're under the right mindset, and then to schedule the patient after that's happened, and then they'll be properly qualified. If you do this on a regular basis, it means, number 1, you're not answering the phone from a tactical position ever again. Amy says, Amy's being very kind. She says she's feverishly taking notes. I'm sure she's actually just going, yeah, whatever. But you got a kick out of that, Mr. Producer. But again, your goal is, see, I lose. It's like squirrel. I'm like my lab. Somebody threw a tennis ball, and I'm chasing the ball now, and I forget where I am. But if you understand where we're trying to go with this, then you're no longer going to answer the phone in a tactical scenario. You realize that every time that phone rings, it is a strategic opportunity for you to set all of us up in the back and to set the patient up all under the proper mindset. When you do this, you're going to be amazed. Number 1, you're not going to have nearly, you're still going to have challenges with this, but not nearly to the point where when you present a financial, you're not going to have a situation where the patient is not prepared for that. They're already coming in the door. Number 2, you're not going to have a challenge scheduling the patient, because in a conversation like I'm explaining, it's not that you're pushing the patient into the appointment. It's the other way around. When you're asking these questions and the patient becomes properly qualified, they are actually pulling the appointment from you, because they were calling for this one thing. Now 2 or 3 minutes into the call, they realize they should have been calling for all these other things. Now there's a sense of urgency, and they're pulling the appointment from you. It's much easier to schedule the patient. The patient shows up under the right realization. They're not going to freak out when they get a diagnosis, because they kind of already knew sort of what to expect. You guys are going to be able to schedule properly because you have a much better idea of what you're up against before you even meet the patient. You're also not going to run into the scenario where when you present the financial, the patient is not ready to make a decision, because after you hung up that call, they're already thinking about it. And when they're driving to that appointment, they're already thinking about what it is they're in a buying state already, even though they don't necessarily know what the diagnosis is going to be. The seeds have been planted, and so it's a much different scenario. You're going to eliminate all 4 of those things simply from properly qualifying on that initial call. So this show is all about you having better results. It's about happier clients. It's about making more money, and it's about enjoying the ride. I hope I did a good job of explaining to you that if you lay out this call in a way that the realization is there and the patient's coming in under the right mindset and ready to buy, you've eliminated so much trouble and heartache and stress in your life. You've made the schedule easier, the presentation easier, the financial easier. You've made it easier for the patient to accept because they're in the right mindset. And that is what's going to help you be in a situation to have happier clients, better results, making more money, and enjoying the ride. And that's why we're here every Wednesday at 4:30 to have these conversations, is simply for you to have all of those things. And there's Faith and Melanie. Thumbs up to you guys. Thanks for joining me. I really appreciate it. Thanks for all the thumbs up. Remember, happier clients, better results, making more money, and enjoying the ride is not only possible, I submit it's your responsibility. And that's why we're here every Wednesday, specifically at this time. Thanks for joining me. I'm Sean. I'll see you next time on Dental Profits.